Controls. Really the issue of controls. It's the fourth function of management. You want to sit down and if you're going to be actually planning, then organizing, then leading the organization, you can do all that and it sounds good, except for the fact if you don't go back and double check on everything or control it, you may not know the results of it. So controls is to monitor performance, is to look and see where you're at the moment, then also compare that to the expectations. Sometimes it's involving data, sometimes it's just doing the check, sometimes it's just counting the number of items there. It's pretty common to sit down there and have what's called a physical inventory every single year to see how much product you actually have in reality compared to what you think you have. And so you're looking at that, and the difference between them, if there is a difference, is called shrinkage. So you look at stuff like that in the aspect of physical inventory. Other times you're going to sit down and see volume controls. You're going to see literally, is the money there where it's supposed to be? And if not, where is it at and what happened to it? There's different ways to sit down there when you monitor the performance. Here are the 6 reasons controls needed. If you're going to adapt to change, and really the world is full of change almost on a daily basis. We're inundated with so much data, information that we have to adapt. Look for irregularities. If you're going down the line, making certain everything is in place. Once upon a time, years ago, I went and I used to have cereal for breakfast. I don't anymore, if I healthier diet, okay, but the reality was I had cereal and it just is my favorite stuff. It just tasted awful. I wrote the company and the company responded back. I got a huge amount of different free gift certificates to buy more product, of course, and what they said was, thank you for your information. We went and we checked the machines and we found out that this one machine that dispenses this particular product into it simply wasn't working, and thanks to you, it's fixed it, and we resolved this issue. Thank you very much. I got a thank you letter and an admission that it was broken, and they fixed it because of my letter. That was kind of a nice feeling in the aspect of, yes, I got the free coupons, but also it was one of those moments of somebody actually listened to me as a consumer. Another reason you look on the aspect of control is you can reduce costs. Sometimes you can be doing the same thing over and over again, except for the fact you can probably do exactly the same thing by maybe skipping 1 or 2 steps if you can see a redundancy that's involved. So it adds value to it. You can detect opportunities and increase the innovation. You can have some type of feedback. You know, a lot of times the C-suite, they're sitting up there, your chief executive officer, your chief operations officer, and all the different chiefs sitting around the table. They sit in this lofty different room and they make these grandiose decisions, but they make them without even checking in with the people at the lowest level that are implementing the decisions. It's incredible if you get out of the office and go check with those people, all the good things you can find because of the fact that if you just did this, if you did this, and all of a sudden, boom, you have a brilliant idea and you make a change based upon that and you can save a lot of money and a lot of time. So listening is a big thing, and that's where that feedback comes in. And then decentralized decision-making and facilitate teamwork. You know, this is it's a big mantra out there. We're going to decentralize everything, but it's really hard to free up control because of the fact that it's the nature of a lot of bureaucrats to have power because we need to have uniformity. Well, when you decentralize, you don't have uniformity, but you're closer to the action with the actual customer. So these are the 6 reasons for control. Planning, organizing, leading, controlling. The last one is as critical as all the rest of them. If you don't find out if your plan is actually working, if you don't find out your organization is actually doing what it's supposed to, your resources are where they are, the tasks are written appropriately, if you don't sit down and have your leaders providing good leadership, then you find that out by checking on the controlling part of it as well. You do need all 4 functions of management all the time, nonstop. So here is the aspect of looking for opportunities, feedback, decentralization. Really, a lot of times what you're going to have is on the decentralization, I've seen it, I call it an organizational wave. You sit down there and he says, we have things out of control. We need to save money and have costs. So you have this consolidation, and you bring things together into a central office. And then that CEO, they're going to save all this money. And then you know what? People get sick of that after a while. And after 4 years, they start hunting the CEO. And finally, after 6 years, they fire the CEO. They bring in another one that's going to, we need to have more feedback from the customers. Let's go out and listen to them more. So decentralization. You go through the same wave. And then 4 to 6 years later, you fire that CEO and you bring somebody else. And you got a wave that kind of goes up and down and up and down. And really, it's about decentralization and centralization. It depends where you're at. You look at the steps of controls that you have and the types of controls. Here is the thing called a benchmark. Benchmark gets a term from this aspect over here. You see the little, it looks like an ancient petroglyph carved in rocks, but actually that is a metal stake there from a surveyor's transit. What they do is they'll sit down there if they want to see exactly where the land is supposed to be. They take their transit out, they look this way, and they mark it, and then they go to the other corner and they mark that corner as well. We call that aspect really the actual benchmark because of the fact that if you have to come back and redo the survey, you go to the benchmark as to this is a standard. Well, the same thing is true for us in our industries. Depending upon what industry that you're in. You want to look for the best example of how it's done exactly correctly. And you look at that and then you compare that to where you're at. You may find that you're below that like most people will, and you're going to sit down and look at that and say, well, I want to sit there and be the best in the industry. So then you compare yourself and how do I get from this level here up to this level to reach the best mark and be at that same level as the best example in the entire industry. It's called benchmarking, and that's where your standards should really focus on trying to be the best in the industry. What is the outcome that we want to have? Here's where we're at. Let's do the things to make us the best and to match that benchmark. So you look at all the different standards, you take the standards, and then you start working towards those standards, and then you take whatever corrective action you have to make sure it happens, and that's your desirable outcome in the process. This is all about control and doing measurements to see where you're at. Establish the standards, measure the performance. How am I doing? Here's the benchmark. Here's our standards. They match the same. Boy, are we going to get there? So you measure the performance and see if you're rising over there, and then you compare the performance to the standards, and then you take corrective action if necessary. And you have this constant loop, which is what the control process really should be all about. Here's an example of a control chart. Really, if you're looking at assigned readings and so on, you can sit down and control your own thing as to, I need to sit down and study X amount of minutes every single week. And you start logging it and you find out, well, I'm not quite doing it the way I'm supposed to. I'm always cramming for a test because I don't do my homework on a regular basis in a timely fashion. Oh, I have to sit down and, yes, you can apply this to your studies in class. Some of you maybe should. So by the time we're all done, we call different kinds of control. Feedback control, feed forward control. If we're going to reach this particular standard, we need to up it over here and over here. It's called feed forward. And then how we're doing at the moment. A lot of different types of controls. You want to have some type of a scorecard. In other words, here's our performance. Here's the 7 points we're monitoring as an organization. How are we doing on safety? How are we doing on production? Are we reaching the number of people in our audience that we have? You may have a scorecard having a whole series, a matrix, so to speak, of different areas that you want to check on a regular basis. We call that a scorecard or a dashboard, depending upon what your organization wants. Okay, what are we doing well and what are we not doing? Keep on measuring it nonstop. You can go on in this whole area of measuring, except for the fact if you don't have feedback and then implement the data that you got from the feedback, you'll still not be doing effective work that you're supposed to. And that really is what this control issue is all about. You have a really balanced scorecard. You want to look at the financial perspective, how you're making your money. You want to look at the business perspective, innovation, and are you leading in the organization? And then the customer perspective. Make certain that you have this balanced scorecard, that you're looking at all the different data and measurements and the metrics that are going to make you an excellent place. Benchmarking, know what the best benchmark in your industry is, and then look at those 6 costs at the very beginning of this presentation. Really the aspect of the 6 steps of the cost, the innovation, the decentralization, I think is really key an awful lot of times. The feedback, change support, make sure you're supporting the change that you want within the organization, and measure for irregularities. Those 6 are really the 6 major steps for using controls and why they exist. Take care.